Welcome back, everyone, to Interventions and Detentions with Brad, the podcast where we talk about the realities of education, the challenges we face, and the opportunities we have to make a difference in the lives of students every single day. I'm your host, Brad, and as always, I appreciate you spending part of your day with me today. Well, educators, we've made it, or maybe almost made it. Another school year is coming to a close. Depending on where and when you're listening, you may have already packed up your classroom, turned in your keys, completed your final grades, or maybe you're still counting down the days until summer officially begins. Gosh, I hope not. I hope you're done, folks. It's June already. Either way, you're standing at an important point on your educational calendar. It's the point that often really gets overlooked, in my opinion. It's a point that doesn't come with a lot of fanfare. There aren't awards attached to it. There usually aren't even professional development certificates attached to it. And yet, it really may be one of the most valuable opportunities for growth that we have during the school year. Today, we're talking about reflective leadership and reflective teaching, finishing strong and growing stronger. Specifically, we're talking about how educators and school leaders can intentionally use the end of the school year as a powerful opportunity for reflection, for growth, and for preparation for what's around the corner next. Because here's the reality. Many educators finish this school year exhausted. I know I was there. Many administrators finish the school year exhausted. And when we're exhausted, our natural tendency is to sprint towards summer and never look back. We close that classroom door, we lock the office, we stack the papers, we file away the reports, and mentally, we just move on. I understand that temptation. I've felt it myself. I'm feeling it right now. I'm in the transitional phase of leaving my current building and school corporation because I've accepted a new elementary principal position in a neighboring district. I can tell you firsthand, reflecting is not where I'm at the moment. I'm more in the moment of, getting things finished up. Finishing one building while still focusing on my new building and hiring for my new building. It's crazy. It'll probably be like late June where I start to reflect on this past year. But until then, I want to focus on you, because if you are not careful, you're going to miss one of the greatest professional learning opportunities available to you. And I don't want you to let that happen. That opportunity is the opportunity to learn from our own experiences, from your own experiences. So today, we're going to talk about why reflection matters, how effective teachers use reflective practices, how school leaders can build reflective cultures, practical strategies that you can implement immediately, and some questions that can help guide your thinking as you close one chapter and prepare for another. So grab your coffee, finish cleaning out that desk drawer, and let's dive in. So why does reflection matter? Let's start with a simple question. What separates experience from expertise? Think about that for a moment. Most educators know teachers who have taught for 30 years. Most educators also know teachers who have taught 1 year 30 times. The difference isn't necessarily talent. The difference isn't necessarily intelligence. The difference often comes down to reflection. Experience alone does not guarantee growth. Experience combined with reflection creates growth. A teacher can repeat the same practices year after year after year after year without significant improvement. Or a teacher can intentionally examine those practices, evaluate their outcomes, make adjustments, and continuously improve. The same is true for us administrators as school leaders. The same is true for principals. The same is true for instructional coaches or interventionists. Reflection transforms experience into learning. Educational researcher John Dewey famously wrote that we do not learn from experience alone. We learn from reflecting on that experience. And that's a powerful idea, because every school year provides us with thousands of data points. Thousands. Things like student interactions, parent conversations, faculty meetings, professional development sessions, classroom lessons, behavior incidents, celebrations, failures, successes, challenges, breakthrough moments. The question isn't whether those experiences happened. The question is whether we'll learn from them. And learning requires intentional reflection. So do you live in the myth of the perfect year? One challenge educators often face is the belief that reflection is only necessary when things go poorly. Now, I don't think that's necessarily true. It's not uncommon, but I don't know that's the only time. Some of the most important reflection happens after success. Let's imagine a teacher had an incredible year. Student achievement improved, relationships flourished and grew, classroom management was strong, parents were supportive, everything just seemed to click. It's tempting, very tempting, to simply celebrate that and move on. But reflective practitioners ask different questions, like, why did it work so well? What practices contributed to the success? Which systems supported the positive outcomes? What conditions should be preserved next year? How can those successes be replicated? Without reflection, even success can become something that's just accidental. Reflection helps us identify what worked so we can intentionally repeat it. Likewise, when things don't go according to plan, reflection helps us avoid assigning blame and instead focus on the growth. Reflective educators don't ask, who messed this up? They ask, what can I learn from this? That's a critical distinction. Growth-focused reflection isn't about guilt, it's about learning. So I want to focus for a moment on reflective teaching practices. Let's spend some time specifically talking about classroom teachers. If you're a teacher listening today, I want to offer several reflective practices that can make a meaningful difference in your teaching. Practice number 1, review your classroom culture. That's probably the most important, because if you don't have a positive classroom culture, everything else is going to be very difficult. Review that classroom culture, not your curriculum, not your assessment scores, not your standards, but your culture. Ask yourself, did students feel safe in my classroom? Number 1 priority. Did students feel valued? Right under number 1. Do they feel valued? Did students feel respected? Ask yourself, did students feel connected? Did every student have at least one positive interaction with me, the teacher, each week? Culture is often invisible when it's working well, but culture drives everything else. Students learn best when they feel that they belong. Reflective teachers intentionally examine the climate that they create. All right, practice number 2, review those instructional strategies. Think about the lessons that truly worked this year, not just lessons that the students enjoyed, lessons that produced meaningful learning, meaningful outcomes. What instructional approaches generated the engagement? What approaches generated deeper thinking? That's a huge one. What lessons consistently fell flat? What adjustments could improve those lessons? One of my favorite reflection exercises involves creating 2 lists. The first list is called the keep doing list. The second is called stop doing. Pretty simple, right? Keep doing includes practices that produced those positive results. The stop doing, that includes practices that consumed energy without producing meaningful outcomes. Simple, powerful, and effective. Practice number 3, review your student relationships. So we've talked culture, we've talked instruction, now we're going to talk relationships. Think about the students who flourished. Think about the students who struggled. Think about the students who surprised you. And ask yourself, who did I connect with most effectively? Who did I struggle to connect with? Why? What can I learn from those relationships? Some of the greatest professional growth comes from the honesty and honestly examining the students who challenge us the most. Not from a place of criticism, but from a place of curiosity. Now let's shift gears and talk about reflective leadership for a moment. When you're a principal or assistant principal, instructional coach, department chair, teacher leader, reflection's equally important. Leadership can be incredibly reactive. You've got all the things. You've got emails. You've got meetings, behavior issues, schedules, transportation concerns, staffing challenges, budget questions. The list goes on and never ends. And because leadership often requires constant decision making, it's easy to move from one issue to the next without reflection. But reflective leaders intentionally take a pause. And they'll ask questions to themselves like, what decision had the greatest positive impact this year? What initiatives gained us momentum? What initiatives stalled us? Why did they stall us? What challenges consumed the most of my time? Were those challenges predictable? Could I see them coming? Could systems be improved or maybe be put in place to help support better decision making? Did our staff feel supported? Did our students feel supported? Did our families feel connected to the building? Did my actions align with my priorities? That last question is really, really important. Did my actions align with my priorities? Every school has priorities. It might be student achievement, school culture, staff support, student engagement, family partnerships, all the above. But sometimes our calendars reveal different priorities than our mission statements. Reflective leaders examine both, because leadership isn't simply about what we say matters. Leadership's about where we invest our time and our attention and our energy. And it's important to know that there is power in collective reflection. One mistake schools often make is treating reflection as an individual activity only. Reflection certainly starts at the individual level. But sometimes, some of the most powerful reflection happens collectively as a group. Think about your staff for a minute. Every teacher experienced the year differently. Every grade level saw different challenges. Every department learned different lessons. When schools create opportunities for collaborative reflection, everyone benefits. Consider questions like, what were our biggest successes this year? What barriers limited student growth? What systems worked well? What systems need adjustment? What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What should we continue doing? These conversations often uncover insights that no single individual could identify alone. And I think it's something that would be important for me in my transitional stage, maybe handing off these questions to my current staff in order to, give the new person some insight of what things were going well, what things maybe need to go away as they come into this building. And I could see it being used with my new staff to give me an idea of where they want to go next. What direction do we want to go? That collective reflection builds shared ownership and shared leadership. And that shared ownership actually will strengthen the school culture. We need to be able to have reflection without judgment. That's so important. One of the most important things I want to emphasize today is this. Reflection should not become self-punishment. Too often, we as educators reflect by focusing exclusively on the mistakes. They replay difficult conversations, the failed lessons, the missed opportunities, decisions that they wish they could change, And while there is certainly value in acknowledging mistakes, healthy reflection requires a balance. We got to celebrate the growth. We've got to recognize progress. We need to acknowledge accomplishments, and we need to honor effort. We need to give ourselves permission to recognize what went well. Because the reality is that education is difficult work. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. There will always be things that we wish we had done differently. Always. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is continuous improvement. And continuous improvement begins with honest, balanced reflection. One of the challenges with reflection is that many educators understand its importance, but they aren't always sure where to begin. Reflection can quickly become vague. You sit down, you think about the year for a few minutes and conclude with something like, overall it was a pretty good year. While there's nothing wrong with that conclusion, it doesn't necessarily help us make growth. Meaningful reflection requires specific questions. The quality of our reflection is often determined by the quality of the questions that we ask ourselves in that moment. For classroom teachers, consider starting with something like this. What was the most successful lesson I taught this year? Okay, we mentioned that one already. Why was it successful? What specific instructional moves contributed to student learning? Can I replicate those conditions next year? Then consider an opposite question. What lesson or unit produced the least amount of student engagement or learning? And why? Really examine that, dissect that for a moment. Were students unclear about the expectations? Was the content just too difficult? Was the pacing off? Did I rely too heavily on teacher talk? Ooh, that's a big one. I could probably do a whole episode on teacher versus student talk. What changes could improve that lesson in the future? Another valuable question is this. When were students most engaged? Thinking about those moments, was it during collaborative learning, hands-on activities, class discussions, maybe project-based learning, independent inquiry, maybe technology integration? Identify the patterns that can reveal a great deal about how students learn best in your classroom and your instruction. Another question I encourage teachers to consider is this. Which students experienced the greatest growth this year? Not necessarily the highest achievers, not necessarily the students with the best grades, but we just want to talk about growth. Who made meaningful progress? And what contributed to that progress and growth? Sometimes we discover that our greatest success occurred because of our intentional relationship building. Sometimes we discover that targeted interventions made the difference. And sometimes we find that consistency, encouragement, high expectations all helped students exceed what they believed was even possible. Those lessons are worth carrying forward. Let's talk about school leaders again for a moment. Leadership reflection requires a slightly different lens. A principal might ask, what decision had the greatest positive impact on students this year? What decision had the greatest positive impact on staff? Were there initiatives that consumed a significant amount of time without producing meaningful results? If so, why? Did I spend my time on the work that mattered most? Did I prioritize instructional leadership? Did I spend enough time in classrooms? Did I provide meaningful feedback? Did staff members feel supported when challenges arose or times got tough? Did I communicate clearly and consistently? These are the questions that matter because leadership influences, and it often is indirect in that process. Teachers work directly with students. Leaders create conditions that support teachers. Reflective leaders examine those conditions. Did our systems help people succeed, or did our systems create unnecessary obstacles? That's an important distinction. Great leadership isn't just being a problem solver. It's building systems that prevent unnecessary problems from occurring in the first place. One exercise I have found particularly valuable is conducting what I call a leadership audit. Imagine reviewing your calendar from the past year. Look at where your time actually went, not where you intended for it to go, where it actually went. How much time was spent on student learning? How much time was spent on personal matters? How much time was spent on discipline? How much time was spent in classrooms? How much time was spent reacting instead of leading proactively? The answers that you discover can be eye-opening. And sometimes our calendars tell a very different story than our intentions. Reflection helps close that gap. Another important area of reflection involves school culture. We've talked about this a lot on the podcast this year. Culture is one of the things that everyone talks about, but can be difficult to measure. Yet we can all feel it. Students feel it. Teachers feel it. Parents feel it. Visitors feel it. And a reflective leader asks things like, what words would staff members use to describe the school culture? Would students describe our school as welcoming? Would families describe our school as approachable? Would teachers describe our school as supportive? Would new staff members describe our school as collaborative? The answer to those questions provide valuable insight because culture isn't created by mission statements hanging on a wall. Culture is created through daily interactions. It's created through expectations. It's created through consistency. It's created through relationships. And like everything else in education, culture deserves reflection. One mistake I see many educators make is viewing reflection as a backward-looking activity. Reflection certainly involves looking back on the year, on what we did, but its true purpose is helping us to move forward. Reflection without action really just becomes nostalgia or a memory. Reflection without action becomes regret. Reflecting and reflection without action becomes little more than storytelling. The real power comes when reflection influences our future decisions. Consider a teacher who realizes that student engagement increased dramatically whenever students had opportunities to collaborate. That reflection should influence future lesson planning. Consider a principal who realizes that staff morale improved whenever communication was frequent and transparent. That reflection should influence future leadership practices. The purpose isn't simply to identify lessons learned. The purpose is to apply those lessons. That's where the real growth happens. One practical strategy is creating what I call a next year list. After completing your reflection, identify 3 categories: start, stop, continue. Under the start, list the practices that you want to implement. Under stop, list the practices that no longer serve the students or your school effectively. Under continue, identify the practices that produced positive outcomes and deserve continued attention. Keep the list short. 3 to 5 items per category will be more than enough. Too many goals become overwhelming. A few focused priorities create momentum. Another strategy involves identifying one word for the upcoming year. Some educators choose words like growth, connection, consistency, balance, maybe purpose, innovation, belonging, or even focus. The word that you choose becomes a lens for decision making. Whenever opportunities arise, ask yourself, does this align with my word? Does this move me closer to the educator I want to become? Simple practices often have the greatest impact because they're sustainable. Let's also talk about something that doesn't receive enough attention in educational leadership discussions. Reflection on our personal well-being, which is so important. At the end of the school year, many educators immediately begin evaluating the professional outcomes, the test scores, the goals, the programs, initiatives, student achievement. Hey, they're all important, right? But there's one other question worth asking. How am I doing? Not even professionally, folks. We're not talking about that. We're talking on a personal level. How am I doing? Am I maintaining healthy boundaries? Am I spending time with people who matter the most? Am I taking care of my physical health, my mental health? Am I experiencing joy in my work? Am I finding opportunities to recharge and reconnect? Education is a profession filled with people who care deeply. That's one of its greatest strengths. It's also one of its greatest risks. People who care deeply often give deeply. Sometimes they give so much that they have little left for themselves. Reflection can help us recognize those patterns. It can help us identify areas where balance needs attention, because sustainable excellence requires sustainability. And you cannot pour endlessly from an empty cup, folks. You cannot support others effectively if you're consistently operating in survival mode yourself. Reflection isn't selfish, isn't about being selfish. It's about being responsible. The best educators understand that caring for themselves allows them to care for others more effectively. As you think about the year, I encourage you to identify moments that brought genuine fulfillment in your life. Not just the success moments, but fulfillment that made you just feel good inside. Those moments often provide important clues for you. Perhaps it was watching a struggling student finally experience success. Maybe it was mentoring a new teacher or leading a professional learning session. Maybe it was building stronger relationships with the families of your students. Those types of moments matter. They remind us why we entered education in the first place. And in a profession that sometimes feels consumed by mandates, accountability measures, or endless responsibilities, reconnecting with that purpose can be incredibly powerful. Purpose fuels perseverance. Purpose fuels resilience. And it also fuels growth. When we reflect on meaningful moments, we strengthen our connection to that purpose. And that connection often becomes the foundation for our future success. Let's talk about one of the most overlooked aspects of reflection, and that's honesty. Meaningful reflection requires us to be honest. It doesn't require perfection, not criticism, but just honesty. It requires a willingness to look at our practices with curiosity rather than being defensive. And that isn't always easy. Education is personal. Teaching is personal. Leadership is also personal. We invest our hearts and soul into this work every day. And as a result, feedback can sometimes feel like judgment. Reflection can sometimes feel uncomfortable. But growth rarely happens inside our comfort zones. One of the best questions that we can ask ourselves is this: what would I do differently if I could start this school year over tomorrow? That's a powerful question because it removes excuses, it removes circumstances, and it removes external factors. It simply asks us to focus on what we've learned. Most educators can answer that question fairly quickly. Maybe we'd establish classroom routines more intentionally. Maybe we'd communicate with families earlier. Maybe we'd intervene sooner with students when they're starting to show that they're struggling. Maybe we'd delegate more effectively. Maybe we'd provide clearer expectations to our students. Maybe we'd spend more time building relationships before focusing on the content. The answers reveal valuable learning lessons, and learning is the ultimate goal of reflection. Another reflection strategy involves identifying surprises. Think about the biggest surprises from the year. What exceeded your expectations? What fell short of expectations? What challenges emerged unexpectedly? What opportunities appeared unexpectedly? Often, our greatest learning comes from the things that we don't anticipate. The unexpected forces us to adapt in the moment. It forces us to think differently, and it forces us to grow. Reflecting on those moments can reveal strengths that we didn't know we possessed. Let's discuss feedback. Reflection becomes even more powerful when it includes multiple perspectives. Again, self-reflection is valuable, but sometimes our view is incomplete. This is where feedback becomes so important. For teachers, feedback may come from students, colleagues, coaches, or even administrators. For administrators, feedback may come from teachers, support staff, students, families, and district leaders. The key is approaching feedback with that growth mindset. Not every piece of feedback is equally useful. Not every suggestion should be implemented, but patterns do matter. If multiple people identify similar strengths or similar concerns, it's worth paying attention to. Reflective practitioners look for patterns. Patterns often reveal reality more clearly than isolated opinions. One practice I encourage leaders to consider is asking staff members 3 simple questions at the end of the year. What helped you most this year? What created the greatest challenge? What should we focus on next year? Those questions often generate incredibly valuable insights, not because leaders don't already have ideas, but because the people closest to the work often see things leaders might miss. Listening is a leadership skill. Reflection and listening go hand in hand. The same principle applies to classrooms. Imagine asking students, what helped you learn most this year? What made learning difficult for you? What advice would you give next year's students? The answers may just surprise you, folks. Students often provide insight that adults overlook, and involving students in reflection reinforces an important message. 1, their voice matters. 2, their perspective matters. 3, their experience matters. Reflection can also strengthen professional learning communities. Too often, teams focus on exclusively on immediate concerns. Upcoming assessments, schedules, curriculum pacing, all important topics, certainly, I'll give you that, but reflection adds that depth component. Imagine a team spending time discussing things like, what instructional practices had the greatest impact? What interventions produced meaningful results in our students? What challenges persisted despite our efforts? What did we learn about student learning this year? Those conversations move a team beyond compliance. They become opportunities for professional growth within that team. And that's exactly what effective PLCs should be. They're learning communities, not meeting communities. Learning communities. As educators, we often encourage students to embrace a growth mindset. We tell students that mistakes are opportunities to learn. We tell students that effort matters. We tell students that growth takes time. The question is, do we extend the same grace to ourselves? Reflective practice requires grace. It acknowledges that growth is ongoing. It recognizes that improvement is a process. It understands that excellence is not a destination. It's a journey. No educator arrives. No leader arrives. The best educators remain learners. The best leaders remain learners. Reflection helps us stay in that mindset. And perhaps that's one of its greatest gifts. It keeps us humble. It reminds us that there is always more for us to learn. There's always another way to improve. There's always another opportunity to grow. That mindset, that growth mindset, creates possibility. So, As we begin wrapping up today's episode, I want to leave you with a challenge. Before you completely shut down for summer, please, hope you haven't got there yet. If you have, back up a day or two. Before you completely shut down, set aside one intentional hour. Just 1 hour. Find a quiet place, bring a notebook, bring your planner, bring your calendar, but bring your memories from the year and reflect. Think about your victories. Think about your challenges. Think about your growth. Think about your students. Think about your colleagues. Think about the moments that mattered the most this year and ask yourself, what am I proud of? What did I learn? What should I continue? What should I change? What kind of educator do I want to become next year? What kind of leader do I want to become next year? Because here's the truth. The end of the school year isn't just an ending. It's also a beginning. It's the bridge between who we were and who we're becoming and going to be. Every year teaches us something. Every student teaches us something. Every challenge teaches us something. Every success teaches us something. The question is whether we'll take time to notice those things. Reflection allows us to capture those lessons before they disappear into the busyness of life. It allows us to transform experiences into growth. It allows us to move forward with greater clarity, greater purpose, and greater intention. As educators, we spend our careers helping students reflect on their learning. Maybe it's time that we give ourselves the same opportunity. You've worked hard this year. You've invested in students. You've solved problems and you've celebrated victories and you've navigated challenges. You've made a difference, often in ways that you'll never fully know, maybe not even see. So take a moment to honor that. Take a moment to learn from that. Take a moment to grow because of that. And then, when the time is right, step into the next school year carrying forward the best lessons from this school year. I want to thank you for spending just part of your day with me again, right here on Interventions and Detentions. Thank you for the work that you do for students every single day of the school year. Thank you for the leadership you provide in our schools and classrooms. Take some time off to relax this summer, but take some time to reflect. I think you'll be a better educator for it. All right, folks, until next time, keep leading, keep learning, keep reflecting, but above all, keep making a difference. This has been another episode of Interventions and Detentions with your host, Brad. Tune in again for the next episode, and remember, right here on Interventions and Detentions, it's where the real learning begins. See you soon.